We're finally at the point that everybody has been waiting for, and that is the point at which I'm going to be wrapping these steering wheels in carbon fiber. Now at the moment I've set up on top of one of my washing machines because I don't yet have a work table in the garage, but you basically want to have some cardboard laid out or something to just absorb whatever resin falls off of this. You're going to want a lighter to heat up the epoxy or a heat gun, right? A brush in order to paint it on, a mixing container like I've got back there in order to mix your two epoxy components. I've got my epoxy resins back here. These are from Rockstar Resins. I've also got gloves, a respirator mask which has old cartridges on it. I've got a box of brand new cartridges here in the back, and this random bag that you see here is actually a bag of carbon fiber that I have had for many years and had no purpose for, and now I'm giving it a purpose. The wire stripper that you see there is actually not needed. What I used it for is to skin these wires here, and the reason I have these 4 pieces of wire, and you could use twist ties as well, is so that when I wrap the carbon on the steering wheel, I can tighten those down into the grooves, which is going to cause the carbon to curve down into the grooves. You want to do that so that the carbon seats into here as opposed to just laying flush over there, so that you have a nice rounded carbon fiber edge. Alright, I've got my new filters on my mask here. I'm going to go ahead and put this on, and then I'll start mixing up this epoxy. Basically what I'm going to do is mix equal parts of these 2 bottles. This is a 1-to-1 mix by volume epoxy. So I'll just be pouring that to about the same amount in here. I'll be mixing it up with this plastic spoon. Then I'll just literally be brushing it on to the sections that I want to carbon fiber. Then I'm gonna basically walk away and let this set until it tacks up. So basically like when you touch it and it's sticky, but it doesn't come off on your finger. And that's when I know I'm ready to start wrapping carbon fiber. And FYI, depending on the epoxy, that might be a 3-hour time gap. All right. Step 1. Gotta cut this open. And 150 mils of that. Now step 2. Should be about even. Go ahead and mix it up. Go ahead and brush this mixture on. This is pretty thick stuff. Make sure to get it inside the grooves. And make sure the fuzz from the brushes doesn't get in there. Next time I will definitely go with some better quality brushes because I'm not liking how these just fall apart. Leave little hairs inside of there. It's annoying. And I definitely mixed too much epoxy for what I need. Yeah, the thing with the hair is really annoying. Okay. Now here's where we need a lighter to get these air bubbles off of the surface. Now since I've mixed up plenty of this stuff, I'm going to go ahead and bring my other wheel over and start working on my other wheel as well. Okay, this time we're going to be a little bit lighter about it. Try to stretch this stuff out a little bit further. You don't have as many drips. Alright, so at this point, this stuff is tacked up pretty well. You can see it's nice and tacky. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the carbon fiber. I'm going to move one wheel kind of out of here so that I have room to work. Stuff is really strong smelling. Even with the mask I can kind of tell. Start with this bottom piece.
I've got some pretty rugged carbon fiber. And what can I say? It was free. Can't complain. I'll get a scissors and cut this stuff. Just get rid of a bunch of that crap. So at this point, the this kind of becomes an upholstery job. So you're literally working a cloth into a shape. Oh crap! I'm trying not to touch over there. Yeah, this is a mess. This is a nightmare. Oh crap. So I definitely should have probably not waited as long as I did, because I feel like this stuff is not as sticky as I would have liked. So that's one thing. With this resin, I probably could have come in a little sooner. I think I waited about like 2 hours. Could have probably done it at the 1.5 hour mark and been plenty tacky without being an issue. I did come in here earlier and felt like, okay, it's tacky enough, but I've seen other people wait like 3 hours. Let me come in at 2 just to kind of split the difference. And cutting this carbon fiber in here, definitely hard. Oh crap. I think next time I do this, I'm not going to resin both sides of the wheel. I'll just do one side at a time. Just so I can not have to deal with this mess. Yep, definitely an upholstery job at this point. I get a set of gloves that aren't sticky. Carbon fibers themselves probably aren't something you want in your lungs, but the epoxy smell is what's really killing me. So a key detail, regular old scissors probably will give you a very difficult time trying to cut through carbon fiber. So I actually recommend that you use shears, kind of like what I'm doing. Your mileage may vary. Leave it up to you to decide what you're going to do. But I highly recommend that you do it like this. I will say that this stuff does roll over pretty easy. Kind of nice. I thought it would give me more trouble in that perspective, in that regard. But it has not, which is nice. Major nightmare. Good God. Okay. Now, to pretend I know how to find these grooves once this carbon's in the way. Freaking A. Maybe easier up top. I'm just not going to front like I'm going to figure that out. Get this down as best we can and worry about the details later. Yeah, for being this super light space age fabric, carbon fiber is actually pretty heavy. Oh God, it's sticking to itself. It's such a nightmare. What a headache. This part of the process is... God, this tape is annoying.
So I ended up running out of camera memory yesterday and I didn't get to film the rest of this process, but I basically just wrapped the carbon fiber in tape and heated it up. I'm not very happy with the quality of the shrink tape because it didn't really shrink as much as I wanted it to. But I've allowed this to dry overnight. Now I'm going to take it apart, and hopefully the carbon fiber is nice and attached and it doesn't just rip off with the tape. So let's see how that goes. Again, wear a mask. Carbon fibers are bad for you.
Who knows? This might work after all.
Alright, so I got this unwrapped and it's not looking all that bad. I definitely have to do a little trimming with the scissors, but I could probably even get away with adding epoxy to this and then trimming it off afterward. I'm just going to try to clean up as much as I can with the scissors and then do the epoxy just to make the after cleaning a little bit more minimal.
Alright, let's do some epoxy on this thing. Basically just want to saturate the whole thing. It's pretty cool because as you do it, it already starts looking like the shiny carbon fiber that we all know and love. Quite a bit of bubbles though. Definitely a lot more bubbling than I'd like to see. Now, epoxy resins are self-leveling to a degree, so don't freak out if it's not too level off rip. Gotta do its thing. Let the excess drip off as always. And try to brush outward, not in this, toward the center. And then let's go ahead and remove the bubbles. Alright, start letting this stuff down.
So as of right now, the steering wheel is not very aesthetically pleasing because there's all kinds of like crazy fibers and things sticking out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some cleanup using a Dremel, and I'll probably even go ahead and do some sanding on the surfaces just to even this out before I do the next epoxy coat. Now for this part, you're gonna want to have both respiratory and hearing protection depending on what tool you're using for the sanding. Dremel can get pretty loud. If I see that the discs and things I'm using are very loud, I'm gonna go ahead and put those on. Otherwise I might not, but I will most definitely be wearing some respiratory protection. Don't want this stuff in your lungs. So I'll start off with a cutoff wheel just to cut off any overhanging fibers, and then from there I'll go to a sanding drum. Of course, if you're using a cutoff wheel, eye protection is also important because these do explode, and then it's not fun.
Now I'm going to go on the sanding drum.
So I stopped filming during this process because my camera was basically getting basted in dust. And I didn't have a good place to put it without it being in the line of fire of the dust. So basically what I did is I took a sanding drum, cleaned out all the inside after I did some work with the cutting wheel. Then I laid out some tape and made new grooves since I couldn't find the old ones. Now, as you can see, I made a mistake here when I laid out the tape and then made my cuts. Here I cut on the correct side of the tape, and there I cut on the wrong side of the tape, so I had to lay tape back out and do another cut here. So now leather is going to come up to there and only carbon is going to be here, which is fine. It's still plenty of carbon, and in any case it allows me to get rid of all the ugly edges that are left. As you can see, I've cut a groove into here and on the inside as well. The reason for that is now I'm going to take a screwdriver and I'm going to pry off this excess carbon because these areas are going to stay in leather. So let's go ahead and do that.
Pretty easy to take off. Alright, I was able to rip off the excess carbon. So you can see it did some damage on its way out because it was attached to the old grooves and it ripped them. that's fine. I can refill this with either foam spray or epoxy, anything rewrapped in leather. It'll never be an issue. But definitely next time I gotta be more careful about making sure that I actually get the carbon into the grooves. And part of that is making the grooves a lot wider. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. It's looking much better. And I know that as I epoxy it, it's gonna come out much flatter and smoother and nicer. So you can see here, I made the mistake of sanding into the epoxy, and I do mean the JB Weld epoxy, not the carbon fiber epoxy. Mistakes happen. It's the first time I've ever done this. I'll just go ahead and spray paint that black. Same thing out here in the back. But I'm not too worried about that. I know I can paint that black and it'll basically disappear. But for now, I'm just gonna focus on maybe doing a little more hand sanding here, and then I'll go back and do some more epoxy work. Alright, let's go for round 2 of this epoxy. I'm going to do something slightly different this time. Is I've got a container of hot water. I'm going to dip my cup of epoxy in there so that I don't get bubbles in the epoxy, or rather to get the bubbles out of the epoxy. But the epoxy mixing process does take 3 to 5 minutes, and that's probably a waste of video time, so I might not record all of it. Let that dry for a few hours, come back and add some more. But looking pretty nice.
Alright, so I've got my wheel here. So the first overcoating of epoxy has dried. It looks pretty neat pattern wise, but obviously the surface is very wavy. It's not flat and it's going to need a lot of work. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. First I'm going to remove all of these drips from the back. Once all these drips are removed, then I'll go ahead and do a bunch of finish sanding to level this out. Then I'll mix up a batch of epoxy and use that batch just for leveling in low spots. So the sanding is going to reveal all the low spots so that they're very, very visible. And then I'm just going to fill in those specific spots. I'm not going to brush in on the others. I'll do another sanding and then another coating of epoxy all around. Alright, so as usual, I'm going to get some respiratory protection going.
Hey, this is going to require hearing protection. Stupid.
At this point I've dremeled off all the drips. I'm going to go ahead and make some strips of 120 grit sandpaper and just basically go like this all the way around so that I can even out the surface. I'll do that inside, outside, front and back, and I'll do it on both sides so that I can get this as level as humanly possible before I wipe this off with acetone to get rid of the dust and then go into all the low spots with epoxy. As you can see, sanding this quickly reveals low spots in the level of the epoxy. So I'm basically going to do this all over the surface, find those spots, then I'll wipe this down with acetone just to get rid of dust so I don't end up epoxying in any dust, and I'll epoxy this. I'll also hit the flat sections with a sanding block just so that those are even as well. So at this point I've basically floss sanded all the way around the wheel with 120 and 220. You can see has a fairly nice even finish. You can just barely make out the carbon fiber pattern beneath it. You can see all these shiny spots. Those are the low spots that I need to fill in with resin. But first I'm going to go ahead and wipe this down with acetone in order to get rid of all the dust. Fortunately, that will reduce the contrast that I currently have and make it a little bit harder to see those low spots, but that's okay. I've also chewed through the carbon before the previous epoxy application and left this white part here. So the next time I add resin here, I'm going to take a little bit of carbon and paste it down there, and that's going to cover that up and fix that. Since this is not an application where the carbon fiber is load bearing, it doesn't really matter. It's just for aesthetics.